I live out in rural Minnesota, the kind of place where nothing much ever happens, where the biggest news some weeks is a power line down after a storm. Flat fields, thin woods, a handful of neighbors spread out enough that you can go days without seeing another car pass the house. I wasn't planning on telling anyone about this. Some part of me still thinks talking about it invites more of it. But I've decided it matters more that people know what to do if something like this ever starts paying attention to them. This was last March. There's a small playground behind our house, just past the yard, at the edge of a field with a walking trail cutting through it. It was around 9 at night, and I was out there alone on the swing. Headphones in, not doing anything in particular. Just killing time, the way you do when you're bored and it's not quite cold enough yet to justify going back inside. The kind of night where nothing ever happens and you almost forget to stay alert at all. After maybe an hour, I got off the swing and turned around to head home. That's when I saw it, standing across the field, right under the trail light. The music was still going in my headphones. Some song I couldn't tell you the name of now. And I remember the strange detail that the song kept playing the entire time, completely normal, while everything else about that moment stopped feeling normal at all. It was tall, wrong tall. I went back the next day in daylight and measured the light pole itself just to be sure I wasn't exaggerating. And based on that, whatever I'd seen had to have been close to 8 feet. It was maybe 70 feet from me at the time, far enough that I shouldn't have been able to make out any real detail. I could see everything. Its skin looked pale in a way that wasn't right, stretched too tight over whatever was underneath it, ripping slightly at the joints like it had grown into a body that no longer fit. I remember thinking absurdly that it looked less like something wearing skin and more like skin that had simply been forced to keep growing long after it should have stopped. And it was smiling. Not a shape that resembled a smile from a distance. An actual, deliberate smile, twisted at the edges, too wide, packed with teeth that looked like they belonged to a dozen different animals crammed into one mouth. I couldn't tell you the color of its eyes. I only remember they caught the trail light and threw it back at me. Glowing the way an animal's eyes do in headlights, steady, unblinking, locked directly on me the entire time. I started crying before I even understood what I was looking at. My body seemed to know before my mind caught up. I didn't look away from it once, mostly because some instinct deeper than fear told me that was the one thing I couldn't afford to do. I backed up slowly, one careful step at a time, through the gate into our backyard, easing it shut behind me without a sound, up the porch steps, through the back door. And I didn't stop watching the yard through the glass until the lock clicked and the door was fully shut. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the deadbolt to turn. I went straight to my mother's room, not to tell her what happened, just to sit near her and feel normal again for a while. She doesn't believe in things like this. I've learned over the years there's no point bringing it up with her. Later that night, I was on the phone with a friend when I heard tapping on my bedroom window. Not the random kind, not a branch or a bird. Steady, deliberate, evenly spaced, like knuckles, keeping rhythm. My room is in the basement, so the window sits low, right at ground level outside. I started crying again, right there on the phone, and my friend kept asking what was wrong while the tapping moved, slowly, from the window to the wall right beside it. My cat Juniper walked straight to that section of wall and wouldn't leave it, ears pinned back, tail low, staring at the drywall like she could see straight through it. I called my stepdad, Mark, sobbing, telling him someone was outside my window. I wouldn't look at it myself. I couldn't make myself. He went out to check while I stayed frozen on my bed, blanket pulled up over my knees, listening for anything past the tapping. Footsteps, a voice, the gate creaking, and hearing nothing at all, which somehow scared me more than sound would have. When he came back in, he told me there was nothing out there, that I'd probably scared myself with the wind or my own imagination. I wanted so badly to believe him. I remember lying there afterward, staring at the wall Juniper had been fixated on, waiting for the tapping to start again, and it never did, not that night, which somehow felt worse than if it had. I didn't sleep at all. A few weeks later, I was staying at my biological father's place for the weekend, and I finally told him everything, sitting across from him at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I never actually drank. His reaction wasn't like Mark's. He went pale almost immediately, and I could tell right away that whatever this was, he already understood it far better than I did. He didn't ask if I was sure what I'd seen. He asked exactly where it had been standing and how close it had gotten and whether it had smiled at me, which was the question that scared me most, because I hadn't told him that part yet. He sat me down after that and told me in detail what to do and what never to do if it came back. Don't run in a straight line. Don't call out to it even to tell it to leave, and never, under any circumstance, let it see me look away first. Back home, it was around 11 at night, and I'd gone upstairs to feed Juniper before bed, phone still against my ear, still talking to a friend out of habit more than anything. I'd started sleeping with the hallway light on, and telling myself it was just a phase, that the whole thing had been a fluke, a trick of the dark and my own overactive imagination working overtime after too little sleep. I glanced out the kitchen window toward the yard and saw what I assumed at first was a deer standing near the tree line. I watched it a second too long before I understood I wasn't looking at a deer at all. Something about the way it stood was wrong, too upright, weight balanced strangely across legs that didn't bend the way a deer should when it shifted forward. It was wearing one. The skin had been pulled over its frame and had partly melted into the shape underneath. Hooves fused somewhere down near what should have been feet. Dark patches of blood soaked into the fur, and beneath all of it, where the hide had split at the shoulder, I could see pale skin showing through, blending almost perfectly into the snow around it. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember being in the bathroom with the door locked, phone still somehow in my hand, telling my friend what was happening in broken half sentences, my back pressed against the tub, eyes fixed on the thin gap under the door in case the shadow on the other side of it changed shape. I called my father. He didn't hesitate. He told me to say it out loud, exactly as he gave it to me. In the name of Christ, I command you to stop. He explained it wasn't about religion in the way people usually mean it, that the name itself worked like an order, a kind of authority these things couldn't ignore, regardless of what either of us personally believed. Neither of us is religious. Somehow, in that moment, none of that mattered. I asked him, voice shaking, whether it would actually work, and he told me the truth instead of comforting me, that he didn't know for certain, only that it had worked for him once, years before I was born, and that doing nothing had never once worked for anyone he'd known who tried it. I screamed it into that locked bathroom, crying so hard I could barely get the words out clean. My father drove out toward the tree line behind his own place that same night and did the same thing, yelling into the dark, telling whatever it was to leave me alone. My boyfriend, Tyler, stayed on the phone with me for almost an hour after that, talking me down, telling me over and over that I was safe, that the door was locked, that nothing had gotten in. I remember him asking small, ordinary questions just to keep my mind occupied. What I was drawing before all this started. Whether Juniper was okay, anything that wasn't the thing, standing in the snow, wearing a dead animal's skin. Eventually, I believed him enough to unlock the door and go back to my room. I fell asleep with a sketchbook still open on my chest, pencil still in my hand. I haven't seen it since that night, but I know how these things work, or at least what my father's told me about how they work. They notice when you talk about them. They notice when you stop being afraid to say it out loud. He's told me before that silence is its own kind of invitation, that the ones who never speak of what they've seen are often the ones it comes back for again and again, because quiet is easy to work with, Talking about it, he says, is the only real defense most people ever get. I'm telling this anyway, because I'd rather someone else know what to say if it ever finds them too. Because if my father's right about any of it, staying quiet has never actually kept anyone safe. It just kept them alone with it, which might be worse. Even if telling this means before too long, I probably see it again myself. Up in northern Canada, the cold does something to the silence. It swallows every sound until the forest feels like it's holding its breath. I grew up hunting out there, and I thought I understood every version of that silence until the morning it went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. What found me that day followed me for a year. It never once felt like a threat. It felt like something that already knew exactly who I was, and I still don't know why it chose me. Winters up in northern Canada get cold enough that engines refuse to turn over, batteries just give up, and you learn fast that surviving out there means depending on yourself more than any machine. My family hunted for most of our meat. Deer some nights, rabbit on others, a garden of vegetables we grew indoors under grow lights, just to keep something green on the table through. Months of Wright. The property sat about 40 minutes from the nearest neighbor and a full hour from anything you'd call a town. My father always said that was the whole point of living out there. The distance, the quiet, the sense that whatever happened on our land was ours alone to deal with. Growing up, I never questioned that. I understand now that distance cuts both ways. It kept most things out. It also meant that if something did come close, there was nobody near enough to hear you if you needed them. My name's Jonah. I started hunting alone around 15. I was 18 the winter this happened. It was early morning, still dark at the edges, and I was tracking a rabbit trail toward a den I'd found the week before. I settled into a spot in the snow, gun raised, breath slow, waiting the way you learn to wait when you've done this your whole life. Something was wrong before I could name it. The forest had gone completely silent. No chickadees. No coyotes calling somewhere off in the distance. No wind moving through the pines, which out there almost never stops. I lay in the snow another 16 minutes, waited for it to pass, told myself it was just too cold for anything to be moving. That explanation held right up until I remembered the wind had stopped too, and cold doesn't do that. I gave up on the spot and started to move to a different clearing. That's when I saw it. A large black dog stood about 10 feet off to my side. Collar around its neck, which meant somebody's pet, except the nearest house was a solid hour's drive, and nothing about a family dog being out here on its own made sense. "You lost, boy?" I said, more out of habit than real concern. The dog didn't move, didn't wag its tail, didn't flinch, didn't do any of the small things a real dog does without thinking. Its eyes were pale, almost white, like something had drained the color straight out of them. And when I looked into them, I felt it somewhere behind my own eyes, like something was pressing back. I held my hand out anyway. It didn't sniff it, didn't react at all. I dug into my coat pocket, found half a strip of deer jerky my dad had smoked that week, and offered it. The dog took it in one motion and swallowed without chewing. Its coat was freezing under my palm when I touched its head. Not wet cold the way you'd expect from snow. Cold like something that had never once been warm. Cold in a way that seemed to sit on top of the skin instead of coming from underneath it. I remember thinking, even then, that a living animal shouldn't feel that way, not even in weather this bad, and I remember choosing to ignore that thought as fast as it arrived. A bark came from somewhere to my left. When I turned, there was an entire pack of them standing at the edge of the clearing. Same black coats, same pale milky eyes, every one of them, like a trait bred into the whole group. I told myself that must be it. Some rare breed, some local strain nobody had mentioned to me. Looking back, I think some part of me knew that wasn't true, and chose not to listen to itself. The same way you sometimes know a step on the stairs is going to creak before your foot ever lands on it. The first dog looked at me one more time before turning to join the others. They moved off through the trees together, and just like that, the forest woke back up. Birds, wind, the rustle of something small moving through underbrush. I shot 3 rabbits that morning and walked home, turning the whole thing over in my head. A week later, I asked my dad about it. He said the neighbor's dog, one named Ranger, had gone missing months back, but nobody else nearby owned anything close to what I described. He didn't seem worried, just chalked it up to a stray that had wandered in from somewhere further north, the kind of thing that happens more than people think out here. I decided not to push it, though something in me stayed unsettled in a way I couldn't put into words. And I stopped hunting alone for a while after that, sticking closer to the house even on days the rabbits were practically begging to be caught. Spring came before I saw anything again. I wasn't in school that season, so most days I helped around the property. Read in the evenings, kept an eye on the chickens. One particular Monday, both my parents had driven into town, and my younger brother Eli was laid up on the couch with a cold, half watching something on TV. I was alone in the library with a cup of tea, rain coming down hard against the windows, doing small chores that didn't need me outside. Something scratched at the front door. We didn't own a dog. Didn't own anything that would make a sound like that. I grabbed a kitchen knife more out of instinct than plan and opened the door anyway. The black dog was there. Same pale eyes. For a second I actually smiled, some part of me genuinely glad to see it, like it had come all this way just to find me again. I crouched down and put my hand on its cold head. "How'd you find me out here?" I asked, half joking. "Must be the lavender." I always kept a bottle of the oil on my gloves, something my mother swore by for keeping ticks off in warm weather. The dog tilted its head just slightly, in a way that felt almost like it understood exactly what I'd said. I gave it another piece of jerky. "It ate the same way, one motion gone." Then it turned and walked back toward the tree line without a sound, and the rest of the day passed like any other. I woke up that night with my heart already pounding before I understood why. That specific feeling of being watched, the kind that pulls you straight out of sleep before your mind catches up. The rain had stopped at some point while I slept, and the quiet left behind by it felt heavier than the storm had, the same wrong kind of silence I'd felt out in the snow that morning months earlier. I sat up slowly and pulled back the curtain. A woman was standing at the edge of the trees, looking directly at my window. She was naked, unbothered by the cold, her skin pale in a way that seemed to hold the moonlight instead of just reflecting it. Her hair was dark, braided in 2 long plaits down her front. And her eyes, I knew before I could even fully process it, were the same milky white as the dog's. She smiled when she caught me watching. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt worse than that, somehow, familiar in a way that made no sense at all. She crossed the yard slowly and tapped 2 fingers against the glass. I don't know why I opened the window. I've asked myself that more times than I can count since. Some part of me wants to say it was curiosity, the same instinct that made me offer jerky to a dog that clearly wasn't a normal dog. Another part of me thinks it wasn't a choice at all, that the window was always going to open the second she asked. The way certain doors just don't stay closed no matter how much sense it would make to leave them shut. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice barely working. She only nodded and said something back in a language I couldn't place. Low and strange, syllables that felt older than any word I knew. I caught one part that sounded close to a word for night, another that might have meant forest, but I couldn't be sure of any of it. I asked if she needed help, if I should call someone. She tilted her head the same way the dog had, like the question simply didn't translate. Then she reached out and took my wrist. Her hand was so cold it burned. She pressed something small and light into my palm, closed my fingers around it, and turned and walked back into the dark without another sound. I told myself the next morning it had all been a dream. right up until I saw the feather sitting on my dresser, exactly where her hand had left it. I picked it up more than once that week, half expecting it to feel ordinary in daylight, some plain gray feather from a plain gray bird. It never did. It stayed cold to the touch no matter how long I held it. The same cold I remembered from her hand. The same cold from the dog's coat months before that. I haven't seen the dog since. Haven't seen the woman either, not once, not in the year since it happened. I still keep lavender oil on my hunting gloves, though I couldn't tell you anymore whether that's habit or something closer to a precaution. I kept the feather. It's in a drawer I don't open very often. What I can't explain is what started showing up on the porch since. Rabbit pelts cleaned and folded, left on the windowsill like something you'd set out as a gift. My parents keep finding dead owls near the front steps and asking each other and me where on earth they're coming from. I've never told them about the dog, or the woman, or the feather still sitting in my drawer. Some nights I think about opening that window again, just to see if anything's standing there. I haven't done it yet. I'm not entirely sure I won't. And some nights, lying there in the dark, listening for scratching at a door that never comes, I wonder less about what the woman and the dog actually were, and more about why, out of everyone on that property, they only ever seemed interested in me.